welcome back to the show. We're joined today with Mary Gavan, who's talking to us about storytelling. Welcome to the show, Mary.
Thank you for having me.
Mary, share with us a little bit about your background in storytelling and what motivates you to do storytelling type of work.
I'm Celtic. I grew up in two Celtic countries, Scotland and Ireland, because I have a parent from each. So we wintered in Scotland and summered in Ireland. So I was blessed with hearing a lot of stories. But it was more than just stories. It's a way of life there, that people tell stories so that you can understand how a community functions. The idea is that you hear the story and the listener has to give back their interpretation. Okay. And that way it helps grow the listener. It helps them with their identity and self-esteem, but also grows a general community as well. Mm-hmm. If the listener doesn't quite get it, mm-hmm. or doesn't change their behaviour accordingly, then we need another story. And the onus is on the teller, which is usually the adult, to tell another story. I must say, being a slow learner, I got many stories before I kind of cottoned on to things. I had an unusual way of seeing things. So I was lucky. Mm-hmm. I grew up in families that were blessed with good storytellers, especially my grandparents. My Scottish grandparents were particularly good. And my father, who was a teacher, mm-hmm. He was a born raconteur, and he had his own collection of fairies and other people and wee men that came and went. And so I just grew up hearing stories. Being a cussed kid, I must confess, I actually wanted to be a singer. I wanted to sing lustily and bustily, centre stage, take 20 minutes to die of consumption, get up, dust off the good dress and go and party with everyone. But my family wouldn't hear of my singing. I think it was, in retrospect, quite a sound decision, but at the time I was mightily pissed off about that, actually. When we get together in Scotland and Ireland, it's traditional that people tell or perform either a story or a song or a dance. Maybe everybody knows it, but it has to be new to you. It's your time to perform it. So I had to do something if I wasn't going to be allowed to sing. Well, I liked stories, and it was very easy for me to remember them. I was blessed with a good memory. So I started telling stories. So when my turn came around, I go, well, here's a story. Yes. And I think that's really what got me started. That and my grandparents telling me, as we moved from country to country, here, take this to your other grandparents. So my Scottish granddad taught us all, actually, the ballads, the 49 verse ballads. So I certainly had my memory trained with those. It was an absolute delight to do. It's just because kids do as they're told, at least in those days. So it was quite easy to grow up in that system, see the sense of it, and adopt it naturally. There wasn't a time when I became a storyteller. I just grew up a storyteller, like everybody else. It wasn't till I went to university that I actually received some training, some formal training in it, and I also took mime as well. Telling was very different there because the belief was that the story stood by itself, that you were the agent but you weren't to come forward, and so I told in a very quiet, refrained manner, letting the stories stand out. And when I came to Canada, well, it was a shock. It was quite the shock, actually, because people said, well, you must look at the audience. But at home, that's a sign of aggression, to look at people in the eye. Okay. You just look over the shoulder. So suddenly I'm being told to look at people, and my brain is just collapsing with, my goodness me, what will they think of me? There was that, and the stories didn't translate. When I wanted to tell a traditional story, which is what I did, and they were often 50 minutes, an hour and a half, they were full of Celtic metaphors. For example, if I talk about a salmon, at home people know that's a metaphor for knowledge. But here in Canada, people would say, boiled or barbecued. And I was incensed. What do you mean, you don't know? And so when I got over my little pique, I decided I better open up my stories. I need to explain why I'm saying these things. Well, in telling a story, you can't suddenly stop and go, excuse me, a little dictionary moment coming up. So I had to weave in some sort of explanation. And as that happened more and more, I found I was drifting from the original story and actually writing my own material. So I ended up being
Wonderful.
not only my own teller, but my own writer as well. And what I do is I take the Celtic wisdom that I know from the traditional stories and match it with events that are happening in my life. I do that because it helps me understand, and what I'm trying to do is pass on to other people the understanding that I've gained.
Of course.
Usually the hard way, I must admit. So I'm quite happy to tell stories.
And it's a blend of both worlds, right, that are close to your heart.
Very much so.
Yeah.
I think you've touched on something that's important for storytelling, and that is it has to come from inside of you.
Of course.
People would listen if you talk sincerely, and to do that, you only have to believe in your material at that moment in time and tell it from a point way inside of you. I always say I tell from my guts. I would love to be elegant and say I tell from the heart and all the rest of it, but it doesn't feel that way for me. It feels as if it comes down from way down here, just in my guts, and it kind of rumbles around, and then it just comes sailing out.
Now, Mary, can anyone tell a story?
Absolutely. If they've got something to say, and we all do, they can tell a story, providing they really, really believe that at that moment in time, and can find a spot inside of themselves for which it's very sincere. And that's what counts in telling a story, is the degree that you can convey the sincerity. Yes, if you're a professional storyteller, then a degree of panache comes into it. There are performance tricks of the trade for sure, and it does help if you know your words, that you don't stumble and add your way through it. But even if you do, the audience will always listen attentively, provided you do believe what you're saying and you've got it from some point of way inside of you. That's what matters.
Now, Mary, when you look at a story, are there various components to a story, or is it just free flow information? How does that work?
Oh, I'm a puritanical Scot. I work at it. I craft my stories.
Okay.
There's a line in it that really intrigues me, and I start from that, and I begin to write around it. I begin to create the scenario that leads to that line. And because I'm interested in why, the chant of my life is, but why? I must have been a right whiny kid, but why? So I write stories to explain that, but why? Okay. So it's that Celtic way of conveying understanding to people, because having gained it myself, having gained it to write the story, it's my pleasure to hand it back as a gift. This was given to me as a gift, so now I'm returning it to my community as a gift. It's that Celtic linking it round. Yeah. So as long as people have a passion for what they want to tell.
Now, with that story, as you said, that you take a story and then you have to add in components so that people can better understand metaphors and different words. How long does it take to write a story?
Too damn long, in my opinion. Yeah. I tend to brood over things, so I don't have it so I have 5 stories that I'm brooding upon, so I'm not counting that time. To craft a story that I've sketched out can take 25 hours.
Okay.
I used to think maybe I'm just slow, but I went to talks given by people who write speeches, and they say to write a 20-minute speech takes them 20 hours to craft it. So storytellers, I think we're about the same. Same level of time. It takes us 20-25 hours for a story, just to get it to that point where it's going to slide out, and you delight in the telling as much as in the story itself.
Now, once you've written the story, then what?